Hey, smart authors, welcome to another episode of the Smart Author Podcast. Today I'm joined by my good friend Frankie Fihn, who is an absolute genius when it comes to creating automated income and just thinking creatively about solutions and potential problems that people face in the agency space specifically. But he definitely brings that wealth of creativity and knowledge and experience to books as well. And so this conversation today is really based around, getting the most out of relationships as possible and being able to leverage other people's audiences to promote your book when you specifically aren't able to run ads or can't run ads or don't want to run ads. It's really just another way for you to leverage organic audiences and leverage the effort and energy other people have put into building their own audience. So there's a lot of good conversation to be had in today's episode, and I hope you enjoy the episode. Frankie, how are you?
Well, Chris, I'm stoked to be here. Legitimately, we for those who didn't hear before, we actually recorded an episode for my audience, and I thought what you were spitting the other day was straight fire. So I'm hoping I can return the favor today.
Cool. And that actually leads quite well into, I think, the topic of this conversation and where Frankie really shines with a lot of his stuff. First and foremost, Frankie has a book called Beyond the Agency Box, and it's really a blueprint for agency owners who, kind of want to get out of selling by the phone and doing all the wrong things to kind of hustle and grow their agency. Frankie's kind of a, sneaky genius when it comes to working much smarter and much less harder, not having to grind and hustle and build agencies that way. So Frankie has that book. And Frankie also, he hasn't really been able to get many book sales with advertising due to being banned over the past number
Not
of
just
years.
banned, but like super duper mega, never use our platform again kind of banned.
Look, it's great. It's like a grace that he's able to just even use his personal profile on Facebook.
Yeah.
So, there's obviously been constraints around growing your book sales there and like actually selling books and whatnot. And that's actually how we first got connected. I was offering my book advertising services, and Frankie reached out. So, but what we ended up coming down to was that we couldn't really do any work together because we couldn't advertise on Frankie's stuff. So, long story short, Frankie's just been someone who has been tremendously, valuable to me and overwhelmingly has given so much value as well. And has never asked for a cent or anything like that. So I really appreciate you, dude, and the tremendous amount that you go to give every single person that you interact with a massive amount of value wherever they need it most at the current present time.
Yeah, I appreciate that. It's a funny little story on that. A lot of times I've heard from friends who written books, that they're like it's all ego based, or what I would consider ego based anyway. They were like, well, you watch, man, I'm gonna be a best-selling author. Like everybody's gonna know my name. I'm gonna be famous and blah blah blah. And it's funny, when I actually wrote my book, I remember thinking, if there's just one other person out there like me going through the same shit I've been through for the last 10, 15 years, it would be life-changing to be able to just put everything I know into a book that they could go and use. And so I was literally just thinking, if one person buys my book, I just won at life kind of thing. And it's really interesting because it's kind of taken on a life of its own. And for me, it was when I wrote it, it's easy to have empathy for the kinds of people that I help, because they're really just me 5 years, 10 years, 15 years ago. And I kind of feel like I made every mistake in the book, for real. A lot of times, people see me now and they see the highlight reel, but they don't realize that's 17 years into this. They're way more, the failure reel is way longer and way more expensive than the highlight reel. And there's something magical about that, and it's been a really cool thing, connecting with you and all these other people, and being able to contribute. For me, for so much of this journey, I was just trying to figure out how to make a living from my living room when I was constrained in certain ways, and I wasn't thinking I would ever write a book or share these ideas with anyone else. And people ask me about the writing process sometimes, say like, how long did it take you to write a book? And the answer is kind of funny because it's like, well, it took me 3.5 hours to write the book. I got a skeleton for it, started just recording it almost like a podcast, like one up, and then it took me a month of just editing to kind of clean it up. But the actual like writing process, more than anything, just it was like 3.5 hours. I was done a book, but it took me 13 years of making so many mistakes to be able to do it in 3.5 hours that it's like, is it the 3.5 hours or the 13 years of getting your ass kicked
Yeah.
many, many, many times in this game and then, being able to do that. So I appreciate you
Yeah.
saying that is what I was going for.
Yeah, for sure. And I think a lot of people they see everyone today on socials and they're like, oh, like why can't I be there? And for me, definitely, I'm a little bit younger and haven't been in the game for half the time that you have, and I kind of get a little bit impatient with things. Like I don't want to make the same mistakes. But I think the cool thing is that you can somewhat avoid those mistakes by making sure that you're working with the people who have already made them, which is
Yeah.
why big part for me is like having a mentor who has like the business, the life, etc. that I want. And so he can kind of answer the questions of like, hey, what's going on? What's wrong right now? What can I do to overcome this slash avoid it slash figure out a creative solution or anything like that? Because he's kind of lived and walked the line already. And I think that's what you are to many people, especially in the agency space. And especially in the new space that you're kind of heading towards. I'd love to chat about like what your new upcoming book is going to be about as well.
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't have a name yet. I always kind of come up with the title and the hook last. I don't know. I'm just that guy. I'm like just dump it all out of my brain. But it started actually the wife and I had a mantra that I started 6 years ago. It was actually before we had children. So like, I don't know, my oldest daughter's like 5.5. And the mantra was really simple. It was passive, automated, recurring income. And at the time I wrote the book, I had exactly zero of it. So it was nothing more than an idea. And it was funny, like, probably a little oversharing, but we would like, like we were young couple in love, there was a lot of sexy time. And right after sexy time, we would look at the mantra as like passive automated recurring income, like in this post-orgasmic bliss. How do we make it happen? And for the longest time, like I had none of it. And what I started to figure out is there's actually a way to create it. And it's when I say it's passive, I don't want to delude people into saying it's not work, but it's a little bit of work to set up and then creating sources of revenue that go long into the future. And I'll tell you, the side effect of this for me personally has been I used to stress out like being an entrepreneur about money because even when it went well, like you never knew how long it was going to last into the future. And so like you could have a client show up and pay you 40 grand and you're like on top of the world. I just made 40 grand today. And like you think you're the coolest thing ever. But then you don't get hired again and nobody wants to work with you for 3 months. And all of a sudden that 40 grand is supposed to last. And I had many like
Mm.
just highs and lows and they were really extreme. And now I've started to build it where even before I get to work on real work, there's anywhere from like $300 to a couple of grand every day in recurring income where almost literally every day of my life is payday. I'm not 100%, but I'm probably like 95% where like paydays are showing up before I get started. And what I found is that most people in our industry just like frankly like grind it and work way too hard. And I want to show people like in it how you can really just divorce time and money and allow yourself to have all the stability you would have without a job, like from a job. Like that's the only reason people work is because on jobs they hate is because they know they're going to get paid on Friday, and bring that level of security to like internet marketing entrepreneurship kind of where you can know into the future, hey, I'm paid until 3 Januaries from now. And for me what this is translated is like I started experimenting it with it small, but I have like streams of revenue. My oldest one is a little over 6 years ago when we started, almost 7 years now. And
Mm.
it I helped a client set up a software tool and put in a little said, hey, if you want me to set this up for you, I need you to register for the software. I'm going to send you my affiliate link. I get a little kickback, and they have not canceled that software in 7 years. And so it's not a huge amount of money. It's like maybe like $200-300, but man, like $200-300 that comes in that you don't have to do anything for, like month after month after month after month, man, like just lots of little things like that adding up sure make it easier. And what it allows you to do for those of us like work with clients and things like that is it allows you to be in a position to say no, where you don't have to,
Mm,
you don't feel like you have to take anybody with a credit card. Or if you get even one inkling that this is not going to be a hell yes or whatever, you're just like, I don't need that. I
mhm.
got enough revenue that I'm taken care of. Like this would only be because I want to. And so it allows you to just be in a much stronger position to do things that are more hell yes you, because you're not constantly on that grinding hamster wheel trying to hustle for the next buck. And I'll tell you, so much of this for me has come out of the fact that I'm sure you can relate to is as soon as I started making babies, I used to be able to work 40, 50, 60, 70, 80 hours a week to I could just outwork it every problem. And then as soon as I had kids, like I decided like my family had to come first. And that meant I was suddenly constrained to like 2, 3 hours in the middle of the day when my kids nap, that I had like everything I had to do for the next 24 hours. Like you got to do it in this. And then sometimes, they wake up 30 minutes early and that time window gets constrained even more. And so I started taking this to the extreme of like, what could I do in there to actually like move our financial future forward? And so I'm excited to share that book because it's far easier than what most people realize, and it's easier than a lot of the things people are doing. And it doesn't really take a unique, valuable skill set, but the challenge of it is it kind of does take a little bit of like brass balls where you got to like kind of make some bold moves and punch up a couple levels, but it's not super complicated in terms of like execution where there's like a lot of moving pieces or things to figure out. And I kind of show
Yep.
people the deeper principles so that it doesn't matter what social media platform comes out tomorrow or whatever, you'll be able to apply them. But then I go into kind of like specifics of how we're using it.
Okay. Very cool. Awesome. And is there like a rough timeline on when you expect that to kind of get wrapped up and released?
All I know is that last time I was writing a book and I was kind of at this point, it took me probably a month to 2 months to go from like kind of where I am to finish. So I don't know. I'm ballparking at the same timeline, but that's really just an estimate till it's finished and it looks all pretty and formatted, and Amazon has rejected it 7 times the first time you upload it because like, hey, you got a character out of place over here and you're a quarter millimeter too far over there. And then once you fix all those little things and they're happy with it, then it'll be live.
They were just talking about you, like, and your character. Like, you're too
Yeah.
weird to be on Amazon, dude.
Yeah.
Like,
Well, the good news is they don't really have that much of a filtering process. They let weird folks like me on there.
thankfully. Um, cool. So we should expect it by like mid-year, I would say, roughly.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, cool. Well, everyone should definitely go follow Frankie and be anticipatingly waiting for that. For me, I think coming back to what I think you're tremendous at is just showing up and giving as much value and making awesome relationships with people. And I think your new book does tie into that a little bit. We don't have to go into that too much more, but I would love to know from your perspective, because you're, not really able to advertise and get book sales in that avenue. What have you found that has worked for you in terms of organically getting a book out there, or using or leveraging relationships and goodwill in the marketplace? Like, have you found that
Yeah.
there's many strategies there that you've implemented?
Yeah, and it's actually super easy, and you did an awesome example of it. So I'm happy to brag about you too, because I have a concept I call the shoe store, and it's a thing that people in the agency space give me a lot of credit for, but it's actually originally a Dan Kennedy idea. And the idea, he says, if you're selling shoes, the dumbest thing you can do is try and sell to somebody who's barefoot, even though like it makes perfect logical sense because you're going like, well, if you put these shoes on, you'll stop getting spikes in your feet and it won't hurt so much and you won't get the blisters and all that. Like wear some shoes. And actually what you want to do is you want to sell shoes to somebody who has 200 pairs of shoes already in their closet, and that there's always a
Mm.
reason why they need another pair of shoes. Maybe they don't have something that matches their latest outfit, or maybe they need new basketball shoes because the old ones are worn out, or maybe they don't yet have hiking shoes, or maybe they just want another pair that they don't really need. Um, and so it makes perfect logical sense. But what happens is people tend to do the opposite. And so I spent a lot of years, like, especially before the COVID madness, doing a lot of speaking. And I would go from like conference to conference and, almost every weekend, sometimes I would be like speaking here and then going there. And what ends up happening is you get to see how a lot of the big spenders spend money, because you'll see like $1 million deals, multi-million-dollar deals done right in front of you, like, you know,
Mm.
100 times out of 100 when you go and you start to see like these kind of buying patterns. And I noticed just like little things. One of the things I noticed is that two things that kind of surprised me, but they make perfect sense in hindsight. I would see the same vendors at events. Like the same people would set up a booth. Hey, you're going to be at NTL next week? Yes, I am. Hey, you're going to be at the
Mm.
California State Bar? Yes, I am. And you'd see the same guys, and so you build relationships with these people on the road. And then I would also see this, which surprised me the most, was the same people in the audience would go to all of the events. I thought, I'd be constantly meeting different people, and you still do to a certain extent, but a lot of times it was like literally the same people. And I realized that the top lawyers are soaking in all the advanced information as often as they can. They're constantly up leveling. And what I noticed is there's really 7 things that people bought at the conferences, and they bought them over and over. And what I would call the habitual shoe buyers. And it kind of clicked on me that, well, if you buy shoes, you buy them from a shoe store, right? It's like really, really obvious that if you sell Nikes, the best place you can possibly sell your Nikes is at the Reebok store, right? Like all the people who buy the Nike shoes are the same people who buy yours. It's not a different group of people, right? And so
Mm.
the cool thing is in the digital world, this is so easy to do. So I figured out the 7 categories, which were one of those is like expertise. So like coaches, consultants, masterminds. I saw a lot of that sold. Then I saw a lot of just what I would call content curation, the YouTube channels, the podcasts, the et cetera, magazines, the books, like somebody's putting out the information in the industry. Then I would see that there were also like communities. So there would be like LinkedIn communities, and there'd be Facebook groups, and sometimes there were real world communities where they would self-organize in the real world. Then I would see that they were all part of like industry associations. So in my world, that was like, the California State Bar Association, the National Trial Lawyers, and they
Yep.
gathered in industry associations. Then I noticed um, as well, there were like software and tools that people
Mm.
use to execute their job. And then I noticed there were like live events, conferences, workshops, things like that they went to. And then I noticed, of course, they bought competing services, SEO and pay-per-click and things like that. And so I realized like there's really those 7 categories of shoe stores. And so what I've learned to do is really, really simple, which is if I sell Reebok, I go to the Nike store and I figure out a way where it can be valuable for both of us to share my message with their audience. And then what ends up happening, instead of like doing what everybody else says you have to do, which is try and message like 10,000 people in an industry, I can just message one person who already knows and has an audience of 10,000 people. And not only that, you get an element of borrowed credibility. And so this is like a very different way of approaching it. And the ironic thing is, Chris, most of those people built those audiences running Facebook ads and doing the very things I would do anyway. So it's just a couple of levels past that where,
Mhm.
they're now 3, 4, 5, 10, 15, 20 years into those relationships, but like they often use those tools to build their audience. And now I'm just simply tapping into the audience that's already been created. And like you said, for me, that's been out of necessity because I just got tired of wrestling with the ad platforms, but it's been very, very effective. And it all started out really out of something I just observed in real life. And then I was like, I wonder if I could do this digitally. And I found out it's actually almost easier to do digitally because everybody thinks too small and thinks too like wham, bam, thank you, ma'am, and not enough like trying to forge a real relationship as somebody like, hey,
Yep.
I'd like to know you for a long time. And so I'm okay with, you know, even if that never leads to a monetary thing, as long as we're mutually benefiting. Like there's so many ways good relationships can benefit you. And so I think like a lot of internet marketers, like what trips them up is they really do have like a wham bam thank you ma'am, what's the magic line I say that's going to get me laid, get in, get out, get the credit card, move on kind of attitude. And
Yep.
so what I kind of want to show people is that you don't need to do that. Like you just make it so much harder on yourself, and for me, this is a little oversharing moment, but when I started online, I was researching all these forums in 2007, and they all had these like make money ideas, and I would try all of them for like 10 minutes looking for whatever the easiest thing that was going to make me the overnight millionaire kind of thing. And I remember I did some weird stuff. I did something called e-whoring, which is like there's these dating sites where they'll pay you 3, 4 bucks anytime you get somebody to sign up. So you go to communities with a fake profile of like a hot chick, but a believable hot chick, like a girl next door, and guys will just come to you and you say, hey, I don't really talk much on this community, but if you sign up on my dating app link over here, we can talk some more. And so you'd send the dating app like 500 registrations, all single, lonely, horny dudes, no females whatsoever in that traffic, and they'd give you an affiliate check. And that was like just some of the weird things I did. And I remember at some point a friend of mine said, in all the time you spent like trying 2,000 ideas for 10 minutes, you could have just built a real business and you'd be way further ahead than you were now if you just like
Mm,
picked one thing and like really actually tried to execute it. And that hit me like a ton of bricks. And I realized that, like you said, it's really about relationships and long-term value. Like there has to be a real underlying foundation if you want to succeed at it long term. And so I don't think enough people in our space have that long-term focus and can
mm.
like approach it like a garden where like a garden, you put the seed in the ground and you water it. You don't like immediately get a fruit on day one, but if you keep at it day after day, like inevitably it can't do anything else, right?
Except I.
Yeah.
But
If you garden like we do, but other people are capable.
yeah. Um, and yeah, I think that e-whoring, as you called it,
Yeah.
that's pretty much like the spam inbox in Facebook Messenger, like
Yeah.
at the moment.
Yeah,
If you ever
totally.
go into the not the message request, but there's a spam folder and you look through there, for me anyway, there's just hundreds of like yeah, of messages like that. And it's a big old group chat of people trying to invite people to like live cam stuff. And anyway, it's like the dark side of Facebook.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, this is awesome because like this is pretty much right up my alley and what I love to do as well. And I think that's kind of what got me a lot of initial traction when I first started my agency in 2018 was identifying like who I could build relationships with who, had the shoe store essentially, and really just help them get wins. And I think it can be very easy for you to go out and accomplish the same things for yourself. And I think it's more straightforward than a lot of people put it up to. And I'd love to give an example for something that has worked for me. When I first heard that Mr. Ryan Dice was releasing his new book, Get Scalable, on a podcast,
Can I just say Ryan
literally,
Dice is the shoe store since he's a conference owner. He's got a big email list. He's got a community. He's got a coaches and courses, all the boxes we just discussed.
yeah. So like Ryan Dice is like literally Nike of the internet marketing
Yeah.
community. But anyway, so like I literally listened to him on Business Lunch with Roland Frazier, heard that they were talking about like book launching strategies, heard what Ryan was looking to do and how he was looking to take a long-term approach for marketing his book, doing a massive amount of podcast tours, advertising it for the next 12 to 24 months, and beyond potentially. And just putting a lot of resources, energy, and not looking at it like a one-time campaign and event, which a lot of authors will do. They'll just like do a launch event, they'll do a bestseller campaign, and then it's like, cool, it's out there,
Yeah.
it's gonna take off by itself.
The
Well,
the
Ryan was
sit and
just
wait
like,
method.
yeah, yeah, listen, wait. So like Ryan was like the opposite from what I heard, and I was like, okay, cool, that's something I can get behind and support. And obviously Ryan's a great guy. Um, so literally same day, I went to my Facebook profile, went into the poster status or post an update box, and I said, hey, does anyone know Ryan Dice and can connect me? I want to help market his book for free. Um, and literally, there was a bunch of people just like tagging, recommending me, and so on because I, built up goodwill over the years. And that's something that you can do as well. Just takes a little bit of time to water the seed. But ultimately, he ended up messaging and saying like, send me a DM and we can chat about it. We spoke about it and ended up getting on a call probably 3 weeks later to discuss how I can support, and the fact that I never wanted to charge him a dime for helping
Yeah.
him. Like it was a true like I'll help you. Let's build this relationship. I want to help you succeed with something that you're incredibly passionate about, and I don't want a cent. I don't want to have a transaction. I don't want there to be any ambiguity around that. Or, if I do good work for Ryan for 2 months, maybe he'll pay me kind of crap. Like it was just, how can I give value? How can I actually show up like someone who gives a crap about Ryan and the success of something he's passionate about? And I think
Yeah.
that's what like a lot of people won't do. I think a lot of people will always come to a point where there's a transaction that needs to happen, in their mind. And for me, it's like I'm okay like putting in the resources, the energy, the effort, the time to truly deliver value to someone who I want to help succeed. And basically, as a byproduct of that, Ryan, I didn't know, I never asked, but Ryan said, "Hey, like if things go well, then you're obviously going to be someone I'm going to recommend." And he like candidly said that to me as well. So I think it just comes full circle, and you just got to show up and be willing to put in the work and actually give a crap truly, and really help someone succeed. And coming back to you, Frankie, like that's something that I've seen you do tremendously. And even just like in the conversations that we've had on Messenger, like I've always had some issues come up with something in agency, and you've had a solution, and you haven't been afraid of sending me 6-minute voice messages, like explaining what you would do in the situation and things like that. And I think that's why, coming back to beyond the agency box, like that's why people recommend you, because like it's just like it's such a tremendous value, and willing to show up. And there's just so many people who don't really do that.
Yeah. I kind of have a cheat code on that, which is I actually like talking about this shit. I can't really shut up about it. So that's my cheat code. It's like, because for me, like I spent the first 12 years, I had like literally only one other person I could talk to, like really about what was going on in my business life that would understand me. I had a mastermind of two people. It was myself and my friend Dan, and we shared everything, every little struggle, every pain point, what worked, what didn't. He says like I'm one of the most valuable things that ever happened to him, but I also feel like the reverse is true, because like when he started, he was in high school. He was like 15 years old, and he was a small, like 5 foot tall Jewish kid. And so he not only was like 15, but he looked 11, and he was getting twice the prices for like SEO packages. I'm like, Dan, you're 11 years old and motherfuckers are paying you like 2K a month. Like, how is that even possible? Like, it just boggled my mind. Okay, I thought like nobody will pay more than $1,000 a month for this, and you're getting double, and you look like the most illegitimate person I would never ever send money to in all of human history. And so for me, like part of the cheat code in that is just that like I really like seeing people in my audience succeed. I think we are like one of the most underappreciated things. Like I always joke, because I've worked with a lot of lawyers over the years. I say like, the only people who have a worse reputation than you guys are us. And they always laugh at that line. They're like, actually, it's kind of true, because marketers are hated even more than lawyers, right? Like it's like like I don't know who's one or two, but we're like neck and neck fighting for the worst reputation of all humankind in that. Like you could say I'm from Al Qaeda or something like that, and you probably get more street credit than saying I'm an internet
Oh,
marketer in a lot of spaces. Um, but coming back to your what you said about like kind of leading with value, Jay Abrahams told me he always looks at every relationship as what can I give to that person, and he just has an attitude like if you just do that, it comes around back to you in so many different forms. And I think what stops a lot of people from doing that is these poor and middle class values. In poor and middle class values, you don't do shit until you get paid for it. Like he wants you to clean up his lawn. Well, tell him to give you $50 and then you'll fucking clean his lawn. Like you don't do something and say, hey, I did something for you, and it's to you would never do that for Ryan Dice. But the flip side of that is when you're okay with not always everything being a transaction, is when you do transactions, you can actually get like a partnership share of the proceeds. And my favorite example is like the best financial success I've had of anybody in my mastermind was a guy who started at about 100K per year, so like 10K a month or something like that, and he's now doing 600K in a week. And one of the things that he did is there was a big class action lawsuit lawyer. They're called mass torts lawyers. And the guy said, I have a bunch of leads. And he said, I'll call them back for free. No guarantee I'm going to get paid. And I'll see if I can find you some deals in there. Turns out there were a bunch of people who signed up and said, I'm interested. The lawyer just wasn't able to reach it to them after one call, gave up. And a lot of them were reachable on call 2, 3, and 4. And he got a $500 or $1,000 commission or something like that every time he signed somebody. And they had massive list of that. Now I shudder to think about if he said, I demand you pay me $50 an hour before I make a single call, because my time is worth something, and did all of that, because he would have got none of the upside, right? And I see this all the time in our agency world where people sell $1,000 to $3,000 a month packages, and I'm not against any of that. But then when the clients like really win big, they get none of that, and it's all because like this idea I demand I have to get paid first before I move my ass. And I think one of the things that ultimately kind of like is a shift is realizing that if you're going to have any long-term success in anything, there has to be real fundamental underlying value. And so the more you just give it unconditionally, the more it like comes back to you and builds a real foundation. And I'll tell you how I experienced this, because like you mentioned like my Facebook ad account. So I actually have a client in the Amazon jungle. It's my oldest client that has an ayahuasca retreat. I actually just went down there a couple of weeks ago. For those of you guys who don't know, it's like the most powerful psychedelic drug. We ran some ads and things like that under our own account for something similar. I was testing for it, and then Facebook like really banned me. And then I created like I found some of the loopholes and created new business managers. Like ended up with 6 of them, and eventually like they found them all and banned them all, and like you cannot even like touch. So we still run a little bit of ads today, but I have to do it all through like a virtual assistant and through their account. It's very cumbersome and things like that. And when all of that got taken away from me, in the past, that probably would have freaked me out, because like there were points where we were signing like $50,000 a month in new business just from our webinars and Facebook ads, and like they can just turn off the pipeline like that. But what I found is what was actually much more valuable is in the process of doing those things and going to these conferences and things like that. I actually met a lot of the industry leaders who have all the audience in the space. And what I found is even like 5 years later, if we haven't collaborated on a thing, I can still call them up and say, hey, I got an idea for a webinar, and we can immediately run it to 50,000 lawyers. And so I always have an audience. And because the foundation is value, like based on value with real influencers in the space, like it's almost like it can never be taken away. And so I realize it's a much longer term thing, because ad platforms, like they just change a rule. Sometimes they don't even tell you what you did. Like on a couple of our accounts, they're just like, you're banned. I don't even know what I did, right? Like appeal. Sorry, we can't tell you what you did. You're banned. Well, I've run 72,000 split tests. Can you at least point me to one of them so I can go look at it? Nope. And all those kind of things. And what I found is if you focus on like the timeless give value and meaningful relationships, you end up building a foundation that's like it's crazy rock solid. It's like you never live in fear that, oh my God, my ad account's going to get shut down, or someone's going to copy my offer and I'm going to be out of business and things like that. And it just like kind of reinforces the, oh, just keep giving unconditionally. It comes back to you. And then probably my favorite part of it is not the monetary component, which is obviously good for business, but like I woke up today tired, and my kids were like, my oldest daughter just like, my belly hurts, daddy. And it was like, it was kind of a rough night. I wasn't super motivated to exist at that point. I wasn't like Frankie Fihn gung ho, let's go take on the world. And I probably shouldn't have done this first, but I went and checked my phone, and there were 2 messages from like people saying like, holy shit, I just landed something big doing what you told me. You changed my life. Like, holy crap, this is working. Like, this is amazing. Thank you, thank you, thank you. And like, how can you not want to go into the world and do more of whatever, like produces that kind of response for you?
Yeah.
And
100%.
it's different for everybody. I'm not saying everybody should do this for agency owners, but I'm saying there is a space where you know a lot more than the average person, even if you don't have it all figured out. Like you can help somebody who's 100 or 1,000 steps behind you to get where you are, even though like you probably don't feel like you got it all figured out, and be valuable to them, and create real relationships with people in that space, and like actually be of service and have people like pay you, thank you, give back to you in so many different ways. So like I just think it's a big cool cycle, like once you start living that way.
Yeah. And I mean, everyone who is listening here is either an author or an aspiring author, working towards something, typically has a business as well. So I feel like there's a level of how you've got an expertise that you can provide to a group of people that you've identified and written a book for. And, as you'd probably attest, like long process to write a book, experience has to go into it, and time and knowledge. So, for like some actionable steps here, I think it's definitely like, who has your audience, who is, has the people who are already buying similar things or need help with those similar things, and how can you create win-win relationships with those people? That's not necessarily transactional, but definitely value driven. And then to further that point, it's like, what can you do to just show up in tremendous ways to, give value to them? Can you like do any kind of like workshops? Can you do any kind of other value-based things? Can you give them products? I'd love if you can give some more examples here as well.
Yeah, and I think it's even easier than that. It's a process all the pros do, and I call it active listening. So you mentioned earlier Ryan Dice, and you said, I heard that he talked about he's going to promote this book for the next 12 or 24 months, and they were going to try and run some ads, and they were going to do this thing. That started with listening. That didn't start with like talking or trying to figure out some magic script or
Mm.
whatever. That started with paying attention to somebody who has an audience. And the thing about it is, like a lot of times people think like, oh great, now I gotta like read novels, but like most people don't do 30 seconds of listening. I made a post about this the other day, but it's kind of funny. Like I wrote a book, and the big idea behind the book is like I don't do meetings or phone calls. Like
Mm.
I don't do meetings or phone calls to make sales. I don't do meetings or phone calls for existing clients. I don't do meetings or phone calls to hire anybody or anything like that. Like all of that, we have video processes that have replaced all of those. And I get pitched meetings and phone calls every day. And to me, if somebody had just spent 30 seconds active listening, just
Mm.
asking the question, who is this person? What are they trying to do? And doing that. And so yeah, there are like tactical things that can be done very much so. And there's probably like 5, 10 tools I kind of recycle over and over and use. But the biggest thing I think is starting with like figure out what they're trying to do and then be useful in that journey. And like in your case, it wasn't like you went out and said, I'm going to create a bunch of new stuff. You just said, hey, we have a swipe file of stuff we're already using. I would love to share it with you. And so it's like, it's not even work off your back. You're just giving away digital templates that you've stuck away in your library, right? So ideally, if you can help somebody with a tool or a resource that's like literally zero energy for other than for you to go control C, Control
Mhm.
V. There you go. Right. Like there it is. Ta-da. I helped you. Right. And that's the beautiful thing about the digital space. And so some of the tactics, like I look at it as 3 levels when you're building relationships. And they're really simple. They follow the like real form of real relationships. I call them coffee date, first date, and marriage. And a lot of times people go to the marriage of like, hey, let's work together forever. And there are scenarios where it may make sense to like marry a stranger, but I usually propose a coffee date, and a coffee date, the simplest way to get a coffee date if you want someone like to promote your book in my eyes is to have a coffee date about the thing they're already doing. So like
Mm.
there's no one size fits all answer, but like if there's a magazine, I already know a magazine struggles with getting articles because I know like as somebody who puts out content after like 30 days, you feel like you've said everything you know how to say. And so it's always like a challenge to figure out like something, a new angle to say the same thing you said a million times. And and so like if a magazine's putting out articles, they need more articles. If a podcast is putting out podcast episodes, they need good episodes. If they're putting out video interviews, they need good video interviews. So I don't like try and convince them to reinvent the wheel. I think about how I can be valuable to the thing they're already building. And then what
Mm.
happens is you're just pitching them more of the thing they're already doing that they enjoy doing. And so it's not really hard at all from a tactical point of view, but why people miss the mark is everybody's looking for like a magic script or template to say. And even though it follows frameworks, like I literally say the same thing, but in different ways every single time. And usually the conversation starts, and this is the thing everybody misses. It always starts about them. Like I'm sure you didn't say, "Hey, Ryan Dice, Smart Author Media is the greatest company," and blah blah blah. We've been around. No, you said, "Hey, I heard about your new book, the thing you're doing that has nothing to do with Chris or whatever." And you're like, I thought I could help you in this way, and I'm not even going to be asked to be paid because you're Ryan Dice, and I know if I help you, I'll get street cred and recommendations, and you'll make an amazing case study that I know will sell other people. Like there's lots of spin-off benefits. So I'd love to just do it for you. But it started with like really listening and talking about them. And I think everybody misses it because a lot of times people come to me and the other thing I think is when people realize you're supposed to talk about them, they interpret this to think that what I'm saying is give phony baloney compliments. Oh, Chris, I watched the Smart Author podcast. You're so good looking, handsome, charming, and fun. And I think you're the most amazing guy ever. Like immediately, all that does is trigger your defenses that they're about to try and sell you something. And so I just like, I use really, it's more just like I noticed something about you, saw you were about to come out with that book, saw you've been working on a new course, saw you were about to
Mhm.
release blah, blah, blah. Saw that your mastermind, you guys just doubled, like it's real. Saw you guys went to Vegas, saw you were up in the mountains, but it's really just noticing something about them. And that alone breaks through all the noise because nobody even takes 30 seconds just to listen to them and be curious about who the person is. And it's like
Mm.
none of it is hidden. It's right there, right in the open in social media.
Yeah.
Like we all got profiles, like the vast majority of people post stuff. You click it, you can see some things they've been up to. It's like it's not
Yeah.
hidden at all.
Yeah. And I think we bonded quite well over Zelda as well. And that was like probably not the first, definitely not the first interaction that we we had, but then that just like further deepened the relationship.
Yeah.
And I think the funny thing was, I was just like listening to some of your content and heard that your daughter was named Zelda, and I was like, dude, what the heck? Like, and then we just like had this like instant bonding moment. I was just like, I love Zelda, and you're like, also love Zelda.
Yeah.
So
Can I
I
just
think
say
it's
something
just
funny
so
about
cool.
that?
Yeah.
Um, that was a funny moment for me because when Ilka and I, like, she was a midwife for a lot of years, so we did a home birth and had like
Cool.
no kind of medical interventions, meaning like I didn't know the sex of the baby until it was born. So we had to have both boys and girls' names figured out.
Okay.
And I never realized how hard it was to come up with girls' names because so they kept
Yeah.
going, she would say, "Hey, what about this name?" And I'd be like, "Oh, I knew a girl in high school like that I couldn't stand, and I would hate to like be reminded of her every time I think of my daughter." And they're like, "Oh, what about that name?" I'm like, "No, I knew a stripper with that name." And no matter how many girl names got thrown out there, we just could not agree. And Zelda is like an old German name, and Ilka is German. And for me, obviously, it's this beautiful, ethereal video game princess of wisdom kind of thing that you're running around saving.
Yeah.
Like for me, like 30 years across Hyrule, back when she was just a little 2D pixel. And it was finally a name that we actually agreed on. So it's like finally, it took like 8 months to come to Zelda, but it was a name that wouldn't remind me of the stripper.
Cool. That's good. It's a good trait to have. All right. Well, I think that's a perfect way to wrap up the show, man. Thank you so much for coming on and giving all of the, concepts and values around the mind of Frankie Fihn. Is there somewhere where people can check out your stuff and get a hold of your book?
Yeah, we got so the book obviously it's on the old Amazon. I'm sure you've heard of that place. You can search it by my name or the title Beyond the Agency Box. It's got, lots of good reviews. Only two of those are my mom. The other, like the rest, 99% of them are real. 1% of them I used to get started with it. Also, I've been asked for a lot of years. Like I put together a lot of trainings, and we have a kind of a best of like how we sell stuff through video. Um, how we're able to get, like, I get crazy cheap leads, kind of using the shoe store strategies we've kind of talked about. I have a concept I call dramatic demonstrations, which is selling your stuff by pictures so people get it. And I put all of those on our website, beyondagencyprofits.com, and you can download that. You got to enter the name and email for there, but it's just like you immediately get hit with all the best of. I think there's like 6 or 7 trainings in there. We have a guide, the ultimate guide to cold outreach as well. Like it's 32 pages, lots of pictures showing you exactly the kind of messages and stuff we send to kind of really hopefully simplify all of that. But if you guys are interested in that, that's on our website as well, beyondagencyprofits.com.
Awesome. Okay, cool. That'll be linked up. And yeah, dude, thanks for coming on to the show.
Happy to do it, brother.
Damn, what an awesome episode. If you enjoyed it, please consider subscribing on your podcast platform of choice so you get notified every single time a new episode releases. And if you're struggling with your book sales, head over to smartauthormedia.com/audit to get a free audit of your book sales to see where we can help you bridge the gap between not many sales to a lot of sales. It's a free resource call that we have together where I give you some clear action steps that you can take to take your stuff from broken to selling. I'll see you over there. Thanks again for listening.